So I know that sometimes the announcements seem like there's a lot of announcements and they're really long. But as I listened to them this morning, I kept thinking, that could be part of the sermon. That could be part of the sermon. That could be part of the sermon. Maybe not all of them, but so many about mission and commitment and fellowship to the body, the connection that we make with one another. Stepping forward and making a commitment of your time, talents, of who you are and being present, which is what this series has been about. I mean, as I listened to the announcements, I thought, yeah, okay, what does it take to be a hands-on church? It takes all of that stuff that we talk about in the announcements, those activities, those missions, the safe parking program, the bazaar, all 100% proceeds go to missions. Well, if you've been here, you have heard 3 sermons or testimonies or talks, as not everybody feels comfortable labeling what they share as a sermon. The first week we heard about connection. Reverend John Brewer was here and he shared with us about our connection, the importance of our connection to one another and with God. And the next week we talked about compassion and what it means to be a hands-on church, and that to suffer with someone, to have compassion with someone, to suffer, to be with someone in their suffering, and how Duong shared some of his own story, both here at the church and his childhood, his personal story. And then last week, you heard, hopefully, if you were here, about courage. And you heard Jev Forsberg, who will be joining the church this morning, along with some of the confirmands. You heard him share about courage of the youth, but also, as I asked him to share some of the risks he took with us to be here. And you heard Tim Kemp talk about the courage of this church and what it's meant for them as a family when they came here in the safe parking program, moved into a rental house, and as they continue to do what they can with our help to be partners, to be part of our connection, to be part of a hands-on church, giving every week on Wednesdays to help provide the meal, as Tim and Jamie do, participating in the youth group as the kids do. And this week, if you've been tracking and following along in your cover bulletin, this week is commitment. The people. Here's the church, here's the steeple, open the doors, here are the people. And what it takes to make a hands-on church are a lot of people. Some of you didn't know that that's what that was. I just saw some of you were like, oh, I didn't. That's all right. Well, we said it a little bit last week, but if you weren't here, you missed it. So that's good. I'm glad. So I asked 2 folks to share this morning. One of them could not be here, but he said, I really would like to share if I can. And so we set up time, and we videotaped what he was going to share and did some editing, and so hopefully it's fairly seamless. But some of you know Dave Asher. He's been a part of this church as he shares for 20 years, he and Haysun. He's one of the councilmen for the city of Kirkland, involved in the community in significant ways, been a longtime resident of Kirkland and as a part of this church. And so Dave is not here in body, but he's here on video. And the other person is Whitney Devine, and you'll get to hear her in person. So this is Dave. Part of Dave's message, anyway.
Good morning. I'm sorry I can't be with you this morning. When Kelly asked me to talk this morning, my mind went off to college. That was a great time of uncertainty. I had no idea. I knew that I needed to be successful, but I wasn't sure if I had it in me. My parents raised me to be successful. And it was my fear that I might not live up to that.
So Dave shared part of his history, part of his story, part of his fear, which I think takes a great deal of courage to be vulnerable with folks. But out of that, he shares why he asked if we could have the scripture that we have this morning, because his parents not only expected them and raised him to be successful, but also tried to equip him with some gifts.
I got a new Bible and $100 and a pat on the back. A verse that my mother wrote in the Bible that she gave me when I went to college. It's the scripture for this morning. It's 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. And the King James Version reads like this. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
And so Dave goes on to share why and what he believes about this church, what he knows about this church from his own participation and what he has heard from the community, and to invite you to be a part of this Commitment Sunday.
What are our fears in our lives in these times? Are you afraid that you're not worthy? None of us are worthy. None of us have earned the grace of God. Rather, we've been saved by God's grace. There's not enough gold in the universe to pay for the salvation that God has given us freely. Are you afraid that you're not worthy? Don't waste your time. That's been answered a long time ago. Are you afraid that you don't have enough money? What is the number that you need to retire? Ads like that are meant to build fear that you're doing something wrong. That fear is not coming from God. Are you afraid of people that are not like you? We have been empowered to take steps to act like Jesus showed us. To act like God would want us to do in building a more mature faith. This congregation is being talked about around town, and as John Brewer came around the region, we're having an impact. We're seeing it in even in discussions in the city. We're referred to as the people that are doing something, that are really living our faith. Hasten and I have been here, now nearly 20 years. In all the years I've been here, we have been good hearers of the Word. But we've been transformed. And we are now strong doers of the Word and not hearers only. We need to keep this empowered church going. We need it as much as the community needs it. We need to move forward the next step and not stop in fear or take a step back. And for us to be able to do that, we have to bring enough resources to bear to make sure that we can continue moving forward. God does not give us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. We deal with our fears when we think about making commitments. We deal with our indecisions. But God doesn't give us a spirit of fear. I hope that you will sincerely and prayerfully consider keeping our ministries going and opening your heart to making that happen. Thank you.
So as I've shared in the last couple of weeks, and as you've heard, and as you received in a letter, today is Commitment Sunday. We're asking you to make a commitment in the announcements with your time, your presence here at worship, but also with your financial commitments. If you're new today, you're off the hook. I am not asking you for a commitment. I would rather you get to know us, find out who we are, and see if this place fits for you before you make that kind of a commitment. The rest of you are on the hook. Some of you have already turned in your pledges, and I'm grateful for you stepping up. We've asked, if possible, and it is not possible for everyone. We recognize that. I've said that repeatedly, and I'll say it again. Some folks can't increase their pledge. Some people will have to decrease their pledge. We all have different circumstances and contexts and income situations in our lives. But for those of you who are able, I want to invite you to step up and increase your pledge or make a pledge. 10%? Some of you have already done that. 20%? Some of you have already done that. And I know at least one or two people have already stepped up and increased their pledge by 30%. I want to invite somebody else to come up. Whitney, if you'll come and share your story as well. And this will be the end of the sermon.
Good morning. I remember very well the first time I resolved to begin a lifelong commitment to giving away a percentage of my money every year. Not just $1 here, $5 there, but a very intentional percentage of what was entrusted to me to manage. And that time in my life coincided with heading off to college. I could now stay up as late as I wanted. I could now even make midnight donut runs to Krispy Kreme. Yes, folks, in Nashville, Tennessee in 1975, Krispy Kreme was an old institution. I could drink alcoholic beverages. Now, don't worry. In Tennessee in 1975, the drinking age was 18. And I could manage my own money. Which meant I could give it away if I wanted to. I determined at that time that I would pick 10% of my income as my intention to give away. Not because I believed there was anything sacred or magical about that percentage, or any less than that and I would be on God's naughty list. It just seemed in keeping with tradition and a good place to start. I know I was a very weird 18-year-old. But giving away my money was more fun than any of my other newfound freedoms. Certainly way more fun than drinking beer and staying up late. I really like my sleep. And even a little bit more fun than making a midnight donut run to Krispy Kreme. Let's just say, of all those activities, giving away money left me joyful the next day rather than groggy, sluggish, or hungover. And yes, my desire to begin a very intentional habit of giving away money came from my understanding of the gospel, of who Jesus is, who I am called to be, someone whose life has meaning in proportion to how much I share it with others. So then I had to decide what causes I would give my tithe percentage to. I was young and idealistic, and I determined that I would give my money to whatever organization served the poorest of the poor and the hungriest of the hungry. So that's what I did. And I made sure those organizations were financially accountable and didn't squander my gift. It was a pretty darn small amount, but anyway. I hate to admit it, but giving to the church was not on my radar screen. I grew up in the church, I attended church in college, but I just couldn't see at that time that they really needed my money very much. Later in my 20s, I attended a very large, active, progressive Episcopal church in Pasadena, California. And I was amazed because this church, at least at that time, committed 50% of its income to outreach. And it included a building and a staff of a soup kitchen and an outreach center which was on their grounds. I attended their new member classes, and I was impressed by the high level of commitment they asked of people who joined the church. Not only a commitment to come to worship, but a commitment to be involved in the life of the church and a commitment to give. They said, you can't be a member of this church unless you make a pledge. Now, that's probably in most new member classes, but this was the first time I had gone through anything like that since I had been confirmed at age 11. And you think I paid attention at that time? No. But I did in my 20s. Anyway, this church's commitment to outreach meshed really well with my youthful idealism. So I began happily to commit a portion of my tithe to the church, which has continued to this day. And when I married Craig, he readily joined in our ongoing commitment to giving away 10% of our income. We determined that our tithe would be divided between giving to the church, giving to local outreach, and giving to global outreach. I remember in the early years of our marriage, we used to sit down and decide together. We'd make our budget, and we'd decide how much we were going to give to each organization. We don't have time for that anymore, but we still give. So giving away money is as much a part of our budget as paying our mortgage. It's non-negotiable for us. It takes intentionality and focus and sometimes creativity and faith. Over the years, my view of stewardship and money has changed on the continuum of do you give to a need or do you have a need to give? I used to be skewed towards the, well, you give to a need side. But now I feel more compelled by the, you have a need to give side. Giving reminds us that it is not our money. It is all God's money. I heard a preacher say once in a stewardship sermon, the question is not, how much does God want me to give away? The question is, how much does God want me to keep? I think he got that from John Wesley, who said, work as hard as you can, make as much money as you can, and give away as much as you can. Ultimately, the answer to how much does God want me to keep is none, because we go to the grave with nothing. In the meantime, it's a very real question for me, for us. How much to save? How much to give? How to live? How to intentionally raise our tithe beyond 10%? My view of money has changed. I'm fond of telling my children, money isn't it's only worth what you spend it on. Or as Catherine Smith quoted to me last week, a quote from Hello Dolly. She said, money is like manure. It only works when you spread it around. I used to feel guilty when we'd spend money to go out to dinner. Now I just pray for all the layers of people supported when we go out to dinner, grateful that I can support them. I used to cringe when I got a ticket. Well, I still cringe. But when I write that check, I say a prayer that some government agency will use it to make our roads better or reduce crime or whatever. Because on many levels, spending money is giving it away. But of course, that doesn't count toward our tithe. I now believe that giving to the church is important, not only because of the level of outreach that any one church does, but because of what the church can and should represent to the world. A place where people connect with God and one another. A place of healing and compassion. A place where values are taught and caught. A place to be encouraged to join causes larger than myself. And Lake Washington United Methodist Church is truly a place of connection, a place of compassion, and a place of courage. Craig and I gladly give the largest ever part of our tithe to this church, an amount which we have increased by 10 to 15% the last 2 or 3 years. And today, we ask you to join us and renew your commitment to growing connection, compassion, and courage in yourself and in this community. Thank you.